hear you. I don't see you, but I hear you.
No.
Sí, ay, qué bueno.
Gaby, ¿puedes poner las instrucciones, por favor? Hello, everyone. We're going to give just a couple of minutes. That way I don't have to repeat instructions that many times. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Hola a todos.
Hola.
I'm going to put myself in the English channel. For those that are just connecting, please make sure you select the language of your preference under the interpretation button at the end. I mean, at the bottom of your screen. And make sure you mute your original audio. So you only hear the language of your preference. If you have any trouble, please let us know right now. We have live interpretation, English and Spanish. And I'm only going to give one more minute just for the people that are just signing in. It's been a while since our last coffee break, so this is good. Very hot and very dry. In Texas, it's 4 p.m. Arizona is 2 p.m. California, Sam, you have the same hour, right? Yeah. So who else is in different hour? Time zone. Oh, Suping.
En Baja
Suping,
California
what
a las
time
2
is
de
it
la
where you
tarde.
are? In El Paso. Are you in El Paso? 2 p.m. in Baja.
3 p.m. in El Paso. Thank
3
you.
p.m. in El Paso. Yeah, Jerry's in El Paso as well. Okay. So anyways, afternoon. Friday afternoon, thank you. Thank you everyone that it's making, hey, it's 5 p.m. in Ontario. Wow, look at you. You're allowed to have some wine right now. Actually, everyone is allowed to have some wine. See, okay, I hope everybody has their coffees with you, or water, or wine, or whatever you feel comfortable with. We have a very exciting program
No, es
today.
de México.
After 2 months, we were planning on the permanent forum next steps for the upcoming years. So we decided to hold ourselves last month to think about that, to do some strategic planning. So we have a lot of things coming up, and you will start getting notifications from us, emails, and new information, some input from you. Even if you're not a member of the forum, I mean, the forum is for everyone, not just the members. So a lot of good things are coming up. But now we have a very, very interesting program. And most of you have heard about what's going on out there on the Colorado River Basin, on our transboundary watershed out there. And we have been hearing a lot of things. What if it's drought, if it's aridity, what is going on with the system? Why is it happening right now? What are the governments doing? What are the implications? What should we do? There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of, what do we do with this, right? It's a little bit, I don't want to say unexpected, but probably not right now, we were not expecting it right now. And we were talking about this before we started the coffee break. So with that, I am going to just repeat a little bit the instructions quickly for those people that are just signing in. Please go to the bottom of your screen, especially our guests today. Select the language of your preference and make sure you click on mute the original audio. so everybody can hear their own language if that's what you want. And with that, and everybody else, let's start. I'm going to introduce our speakers for today. Gabi, if you don't mind. Okay, so the topic, the Rio Colorado and the new normal water conditions. Everything is new normal now. After the pandemic, everything started with new normal. So we have a new normal water condition now, apparently. And we need to talk about that, and we need to face it, and we need to cope with it, and we need to adapt. So we need to discuss to be able to understand what is going on. Not just for the US side of the basin, but also for Mexico and for the binational implications. I'm going to start introducing Dr. Alfonso Cortez Lara. Alfonso Cortez, he is a professor researcher at COLEF, Colegio de la Frontera Norte in Mexicali. He is professor researcher C in the Department of Urban and Environmental Studies out at, already said that, at Colegio de la Frontera Norte. He holds a PhD in resource development with a specialty in water resources management from Michigan State University and a master in water use and management in arid zones from the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California. He is a SNI2, and is a member of the thematic network on water management and research, sponsored by CONACYT. Thank you, Alfonso, for being with us today. Next, we have the director of the Water Resources Center, Water Resources Research Center at the University of Arizona, Dr. Sharon Megdal. She's professor and specialist also. She's Department of Department of Environmental Science. She is the C.W. and Moding Neely Endowed Professor and Distinguished Outreach Professor as well, working on water policy and management. And I must say that Dr. Greg was not able to be with us today, but Sharon she gracefully agreed to be here, and now I can say that we have an even a better program. So very happy to have you here, Sharon, and thank you. Thank you for being with us. Next speaker, please. Dr. Leopoldo Mendoza Espinoza. He's professor researcher at the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California. He has a PhD in water sciences from Cranfield University in the United Kingdom. He's professor at the Institute of Oceanographic Research at the University of Baja California, where his main research field is wastewater treatment and reuse of water, and strong advocate of reclaimed water reuse. He's currently editor of Water Science and Technology, published by the International Water Association, and he is in the editorial board of the Water Environmental Journal. Thank you, Doctor, for being with us today as well. And last but not least, our Associate Director of the Permanent Forum of National Waters, Sam. Sam, he's always there. So thank you, Sam, for being with us today. You are in California, you're an expert on the topic. You live there too, so you have to, we need to hear you. He's responsible for water management and policy research program at the University of California, Agriculture and Natural Resources Division, working on strategies to improve the water management for anthropogenic and environmental requirements by developing reservoir reoperation policies to improve the human environment and environmental water requirements. Thank you, Sam, as always, for being here. And now I will be glad to moderate this panel, but I will strongly urge you to be yourselves, to discuss, to call, to raise your hand, to disagree, to agree. This hour is a coffee break. So imagine yourself, you're taking a coffee, even if it's virtually, and just talk about important stuff, because this is important and it has implications for the border community. So with that, and if that's okay with you, Gabby, if we can stop sharing, I'll go ahead with the first question. And it's very simple. So what are the new normal water conditions of the Colorado River Basin? what can we expect from the system? What are we seeing in the system? I mean, what can you say from what is going on right now? With that, I'm going to give you 3 minutes, each of you. And I'm going to start with Alfonso. If that's okay with you, Alfonso. Go ahead, please.
Bien, bueno, pues muchas gracias antes que nada.
Very well. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation, Rosario, and the team, and the colleagues that are sharing this panel with me. Well, the normal conditions in the basin, you know, this is well known. It has been discussed in the media for a long time. There's been a trend to reduction in the levels of water in the basin since 1999 to this date. It's been a negative trend, and this has led us to this new normal, to having less availability of water at the basin. This is water that comes from the Rocky Mountains, and we are at this point in a very critical situation, considering that the levels of the Hoover Dam, for example, which is an important reference point that connects us as countries, because water is sent from there to Mexico, and it's at low levels. Yesterday, it was at 1,067 feet over sea level. Critical levels are below 1,075. So below 1,075 feet, those are reduction levels. And that's a new normal. There's a reduction announced for next year that triggers a reduction. And this year, this current year, there was also an announcement. There was a request for voluntary savings, which is part of the 319 SILA bylaws. So the new normal is we have 51 million cubic meters less to provide to Mexico this year. Next year, we will have close to 99, 100 million cubic meters less to be received in Mexico. And this is a significant volume reduction. If we compare it with other uses, that's the volume that Mexicali, the city, consumes in a year, and it has 1 million inhabitants, or same as the water required to irrigate 10,000 hectares. So we're talking about a new normal with less water and with potential impacts on different activities that are carried out in this area. And we will have to be very alert to what's coming, because the trend is a decrease. There's no sign of a recovery, and this leads us to carry out new activities, new ways to deal with this in urban areas and in the fields, in the countryside.
Wow. Did you say that that amount of reduction for next year accounts for the amount of water that is used on this in the city of Mexicali for a year? Is that what you said? Wow.
That's correct, yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's a lot of water. Okay. Next, let me ask now, Dr. Leopoldo, would you mind taking over the same question for you, please? 3 minutes. Leopoldo, have you selected the English channel? If you're speaking in English, please select the English channel. And
English?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, yeah, Alfonso makes a very good summary about the problem. And yes, next year, the USA is going to give Mexico less water, 98.6 million cubic meters of water less. Now, this is an interesting number because the total amount of water from the Colorado River that comes to Mexico, according to the International Treaty from 1944, is 1,850 million cubic meters. So if we compare 100 million cubic meters against 1,850, it's only 5.3%. Okay, so one might think that it's not really so important, and probably the system in Mexico could react and adjust to less amount of water. But again, as Alfonso said, it's the amount of water used by the whole city of Mexicali in a year, and very close to the 149 million cubic meters pumped through the Tijuana aqueduct to supply water to Tecate, to Tijuana, to Rosarito, and even a small amount of that water arrives to Ensenada as well. So it's a lot of water. I think, unfortunately, that we need to learn to live with less water now. Okay, I think it's some of the things that we're going to mention más adelante. Yeah, but I think I cannot see it as any different than that. We just have to learn to adjust with less amount of water in Mexico.
Okay, now let's hear from the US side. What's the new normal in the US side, which I'm assuming is pretty similar. Sharon, do you want to take the floor now to talk about?
Sure. Taking your question literally is, what are the new normal water conditions? In a way, you cannot even know what the new normal conditions are because we're in a constantly changing situation. And I had asked for the privilege of sharing one slide, which I'm going to do now, if that's okay. And I want to just show you this one slide here. This is a slide I've been showing in presentations lately about what has happened to Lake Mead elevation since just 2000. In the year 2000, the lake was pretty much full. And then very quickly after that, it went down to about 50% of capacity in a 4 to 5 year period because of then what we call drought. And if you look at this blue line, with the exception of a good year in 2011 and some addition to storage there, it's been going down and down. And the scariest part is we're at the lowest lake level we've been at since it was filled. And the projections are quite bleak. And they just seem to be getting worse with each month or bi-monthly projection coming out of the Bureau of Reclamation, who does the modeling and the projections. And if you think about what is normal, very often normal numbers are shown as 30-year averages. Well, people have been talking about over 20 years of drought on the Colorado River system, which means that the 30-year average is including 20 years that have been, with the exception of 2 to 3 years below what used to be the average. And so now if we say, well, the snowpack is average, it's lesser than the average used to be. So we're already in a new normal, but we're in an unstable period and it's getting worse faster than we thought. So the second part of the question was, what can you expect from the system? And that's less. If we get more, that's great, but we have to kind of count on less. And also just to think about what words we even use. You know, there are people in the US who don't like to use the terms climate change, or they may admit to climate change, but disagree on the causes of it. But these are like really considered now at this point, you might call it a ridification, a structural change that people think is happening. So it's not a pretty picture. I did put a link to something I wrote 1,000 words plus about, trying to explain that Lake Mead has been our storage reservoir, our savings account, and we've used a lot of it up. And the system could crash if we don't take actions. And I think we'll talk about that in the next question. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Samuel?
So I think, first of all, a happy new water year. So October 1st, that's fun. We are starting a new water year. The one other thing is welcome everyone. We've been working on the binational waters to continue bringing some of these events. So going back to the question, so what are the new normal water conditions of the Colorado River? Yes, we've, I think many people in the basin have mentioned that those predictions that were supposed to happen in the mid-century, late century, we are just living those. I mean, the basin was predicated on a hydrology that it was wetter than usual. Later in the last part of the century, it wasn't as wet as it used to be, but the water uses were not as large. The system was not developed as it is right now. So I think here the current normal is that we have less water, that all users and everyone wants to take their share of the piece of their Colorado River. What can we expect from the system specifically for, so 2 places, California. Southern California has their fingers in more than 7, 8 states. So all the way from Oregon and then Wyoming, Utah, Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. So on Southern California, there is we're living the 2nd year of a drought on the north part of the state. So reservoirs are empty. Southern California has been prepared and they've been doing a lot of water conservation. And they have been putting a lot of water in the ground. So they've been using some groundwater banking along the California aqueduct. How long can it last? The reality is that it's not that much. They may last 1 or 2 years more, but that's where we are on that area. What can we expect from the system? The system is already stressed out. And when I say stressed out, is that everyone right now, we know that we're going to have shortages. I think what can we expect is that those shortages, those deficits, people will start from farmers to decision makers will need to start making difficult decisions. We will need to start thinking about more seriously on what are the decisions that we will be taking. Yeah, I think that's where we are. Thanks, Rosario.
Okay. Let me just quickly, because some might have the same question that I do. When you say hard decisions, difficult decisions, and you guys have mentioned adaptability, flexibility, instability, actually Sharon mentioned that, variability. And if I'm a politician or a decision maker, what kind of decisions? I mean, how strict? I mean, we're looking to, if we look for a level 1 to 10 on what, how strong decisions have to be made on these new normal conditions, where will you put the number 1 through 10? 10 being the greatest. I'm gonna start with Alfonso.
Yes, thank you. I think it's 10, absolutely. For many years now, we've been hearing this and for over 2 decades, and possibly around 2008, we went through some curves. I mean, looking at the slides that we just saw, there was the demand and the level of water sort of matched. But then after that, waters parted, and after that, you know, they started going down, and you know, the association, the SILA, started incorporating some rules so that they included this high variability situation. I would call it high variability climate situation, and we don't want to get in trouble here. But they wanted to include, you know, the changes in temperature, the drop in the snow levels in the mountains. So all of this we need to put into the agreements that were signed in 2012, for instance, and the 323 that was signed in 2017. That was one of the tasks that we had to take care of. We had to agree how to manage water on both sides in both countries. So we also have to work, again, on both sides of the border. In Mexico, we do talk about reaching agreements like this, but they should be fair agreements, equitable. And that is exactly what's hard to do. We don't all have the same standards. And if you ask to a farmer, he's going to say, why are you going to take my water? And in Mexico, you know, in order of importance, agriculture is number 4, and the urban usage is number 1. You cannot take water away from the cities. And definitely now we're going to have to live under these circumstances, and we're going to have a very agile binational interaction and relationship. And we're going to have to live with the implications. In Mexico, we're going to have to incorporate a lot more, and I think this is what could save the situation. We have to look at that level 10, but we're going to have to bring in all the local actors, diverse actors, not just institutions like Conagua in Mexico or SILAS. We have to incorporate other local actors, even the final users, the people that are going to be affected by it. That's going to be necessary, and that's going to be the new normal. We're going to have to work with the people. We're going to have to work with farmers. We're going to have to work with the people that live there, because otherwise there is no policy that's going to work. And we need to partner with all these other groups, and we need to do it in a more strict fashion, and we need to systematize it, and you know, all types of activities that people can undertake. And then we're going to need investments.
So Rosario, I'd be willing to give a brief answer here. And these are very hard decisions that have to be made. I certainly agree with everything Alfonso said. You could transfer what he said about Mexico to just about any other region that's grown into using and grown used to using its full allocation. And I want to point out on the US side, you've got, Sam went over the states in the Colorado River Basin, but you've got the upper basin and you've got the lower basin. And the lower basin states are California, Nevada, and Arizona. And Lake Mead is their storage reservoir. And there, we had to work on this drought contingency plan in 2019 because it was recognized that the previous shortage sharing guidelines were not enough. And the point I want to get to is that Arizona, within the lower basin, central Arizona, takes the big cuts in the early stages because of the various history of agreements. And in Arizona, there was an extensive process to figure out how to share the burden of reducing water deliveries by a significant amount. And it was very difficult because in that case, farmers were affected. In other cases, farmers are not affected. And so all I want to say is that there are very difficult decisions to be made when people have grown into using the water supplies, more people dependent on it, and there's going to be less. And it's going to take an extended period of time. There are going to be a series of solutions, but none of it is going to be easy.
Leopoldo,
Yes,
do you want to
thank
take
you.
over?
Yes,
you.
I definitely agree with what has been said. I just want to point out that, yes, in Mexico, let's say urban water users have their water, it's a priority, the use in urban, in cities. And so I think that the people that are going to lose are going to be the farmers. And because they are the main users of water as well. In Baja California, it's 80% of the water is being used by farmers. So that's where we can really make savings. They're not in the cities, it's a little bit more difficult because in the first place, water consumption in cities in Baja California is relatively low, with the exception of Mexicali. Mexicali has a per capita consumption of around 350 liters per person per day, while Tijuana and Ensenada already has 220 liters per person per day. So it's small, even if you compare it to Mexicans' average or to the states in the USA. So people in the cities, I don't believe can save much more water than what they're actually saving at the moment. So definitely it has to be a question with the farmers. And I know that farmers in the coast, in the West Coast, no, Ensenada, Maniadero, San Quintin at the south, they already save water. They have irrigation systems, you know, that are very technified and that are very water efficient. While farmers in Mexicali, they don't have any of that because they're used to have their water allocations every year without any problem. Okay, and I know that it's very difficult to convince them because I've been there. You know, I'm trying to convince them to make their irrigation more efficient, but they don't want to unless as the government comes up with incentives. And I think that these incentives have to be economic incentives, okay, so that they start saving water. And we are going to talk about other options further ahead. But another option would be to reuse water, you know, and interchange reuse water, reclaimed water for irrigation instead of having it used for just underground water or groundwater used for irrigation. But they definitely, the decisions are going to be really tough. The implementation is going to be very, very difficult.
So super fast, Rosario, in terms when you're saying how difficult or how bad are the conditions, or I do agree that right now it looks like a 10, as Alfonso is mentioning, that is really bad. But unfortunately, I think in many places conditions will get worse. To be more specific, right now, Arizona is the one that is in the front receiving all the cuts. And if things continue the same, it is just a matter of time when the rest of the states will follow that one. Nevada, California, so that's kind of, for me, we are just, unfortunately, we're just at the beginning of the same for reductions on the Mexican water allocation. It will be the same. It will be that this is just kind of the entrance point. If conditions keep the same, we will have further reductions and a serious overdraft. So we will have to think more seriously, and decisions will be extremely difficult, from trying to save water all the way to a reduction in water conservation. Also something that I don't want to mention is that unfortunately, depending on the resources, things will feel different. Again, to be more specific, California, LA is preparing to do the water to tap, doing a lot of the recycled water, the largest in the nation. But it is because they have the hands on the wallets of all Southern Californians. It is not the same for some of the agricultural farmers that they don't have or they may not have as many resources. Tribal nations, we have more than 24, 29 tribal nations within the Colorado. And some of them, they don't even have, let's just let alone that they will have a shortage of water. Some of them, they do not have even drinking water. So here the problems will get exacerbated. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And I think here what this can be is a good call, like, okay, what can we do? We've been talking about that one. So anyway.
Thank you. So two things I got from this round, I would say the first, the people that would be more, the sectors I would say that will be more affected is agriculture, and it's equally true for both sides of the border. And this is just the starting. So it will eventually get to all sectors. It depends on how bad it gets, the condition, how bad it gets. So, and this brings me to the third question. Are we prepared for this? I mean, are the economic systems, because this will require a lot of money, not just to, you know, try to get water from somewhere else, or try to use alternative waters, or tap to water strategies, or even groundwater. But are we prepared economically, politically, technically to face what it is expected now? Because now it's there. It's not like it's predicted, right? It is there. And there's an instability, and there's so much variability, as Sharon mentioned. So are we prepared for that? And I'm gonna start. Who wants to start? I'll be democratic this time. Who wants to jump in?
I'll start.
Okay.
Rosario was nice and put me toward the end of the first one. I said, don't call on me early for the first question. But I'll start and see what others have to say about kind of, are we prepared? There are a number of possible approaches, and I think most people following this know what they are. We've already talked about reuse. We know about conservation. There's potential for voluntary transactions. I will note that in Arizona and in California, the farmers along the river or Imperial Irrigation District have very high priority rights. So we can't just speak monolithically about farming and farmers and their priorities in Arizona. And, you know, we did the drought contingency plan because there was concern that the system could fail, and it's already on the verge of failing. If you look at energy production, you know, we've been talking about Lake Mead. Lake Powell is the other very large reservoir, and they're saying that Lake Powell may not have enough water to produce hydropower in 2022 or 2023. That's low-cost power that is used by agriculture and municipalities. And the way I've been thinking about it is, though, that everybody realizes that the system is too big to fail. It's like what they said about the banking industry, you know, several years ago. And so the thinking, I think, is all adapting. I think we're adapting, and that includes at the governmental, the political level, and the like. And so going back to the DCP, a lot of effort went into the drought contingency plans, and that related to Minute 323 and some of the cutbacks that wouldn't get triggered unless certain things happened on the US side afterwards. And it's all been very complicated. And the point is, within no time, we're finding out DCP is not enough. It's not enough to avoid big problems. And so there's now not only the reconsultation of the whole big 2007 guidelines, but there's also the 1030 reconsultation on the DCPs. There's so many levels and layers of discussions that I think people are coming together to figure out what to do and what to do collaboratively. So I think your question about, are we prepared? Well, we know some things we can do and low-hanging fruit. Other things are longer term. will there be binationally agreed upon desal between the US and Mexico? That's being studied. And so I have to say, I think policy's adapting. I think water users are adapting, have to adapt in every sector. And it's just that I have to say that, I encourage people to be optimistic because I think we can adapt because we have to, but it's not going to be easy. And so I will leave it at that.
Can I go next?
Of course.
Thank you. Yes, obviously the difference between the USA and Mexico is very, very large. Okay, I think that I would like to think that we are prepared because the water technology is there. We can treat wastewater to basically potable water standards. We can desalinate seawater so that we can use it for irrigation or at our houses, okay? But it all costs money. And I think in the USA, they might have the money to do that, okay? To make those arrangements, to deal with or to buy and apply the water technology for all of this. The problem in Mexico is that I don't think we do have the money. And every time these proposals of new technology and these big plans come, like for example, the desalination plant that Sharon was mentioning. There were some really solid plans for a desalination plant in Rosario that would supply water to Tijuana and even through Otay, export water to San Diego, okay? This was a 4,400 liter per second desalination plant, which would make it the largest in America, in the continent, okay? Which would produce 139 million cubic meters of water, of desaled water per year. And it was already approved by the Inter-American Development Bank, $200 million for its construction. However, it didn't happen, okay? It didn't happen because there were many questions about how was that money really going to be used, and there were also some politicians involved in all of this. Okay, so there was not enough transparency, okay, in the process, and I think that's one of the main problems in Mexico. Okay, that even when the solution might be there, we have to make decisions really based on science and on technology, and not on political decisions or political interests. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case in most states, in most examples in the country. Conagua, as a central identity, that manages water, hasn't been efficient enough either. So at the end of the day, it all comes down, I think, to transparency. Okay, and because reaching or getting the money to do these projects is very difficult. But then I think that as a community, we don't really believe that things are going to be made correctly. Okay, so I think we have to change that way. And politicians, really, we need as people pressurize our politicians so that, again, the decisions are made based on science and technology available and not on political interests. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Leopoldo. And before I go to you, Alfonso, I just want to put another question out there. And you mentioned this, we don't have the money in the Mexico side. And I'm gonna ask, is it money or is it priority or interest? So both. Okay. Well, okay, Alfonso.
It's very good that you're asking that question, because that is exactly what I was going to say. I think that no, it's not just a matter of money, even in Mexico. Because if we talk about incentives, we have to think of the different types of incentives required to correct the situation. This is a critical situation when you're going to have this shortage that we're already going through. So here, what we need to do is a combination, a smart combination of institutional incentives and then, of course, marketing incentives. They have to do with the economy. And then we go back to fees, both in the farming areas and the cities, and they're not developed yet. And that is one of the mechanisms that you can use to reduce consumption, for instance. And the other incentive would be the regulations. Laws are failing us, the national laws, the local laws. Right now, we have a national waters law in Mexico since 1992, but it's not applied correctly. Not for simple things, just surveying the extractions of water, for instance. They're not doing it. Just at that level is where we're operating right now. So what we need is, of course, we need resources, but obviously we need to see exactly where we're failing. And this is an opportunity to do so and to correct both institutional incentives, market incentives, and then regulatory incentives, because right now this is urgent. So this is not all about money. The farmers really haven't paid attention, and I'm sorry to my colleagues. It's not that they don't want to do it, but they don't really have an incentive to do it. So tell me, you tell them, and they will say, well, tell me how I'm going to do it. It's not just telling them you're going to save or you need to save water. And the same thing, transparency in Mexico. I think that you may have this problem in the US as well, but in Mexico, that is a huge problem. The lack of transparency in water policy is what led us to where we are. We don't have the right priorities. We don't have we do not prioritize strategies for water use. Desalination was number 1. Was that the question, or was it number 20? Alternative number 20. So from my standpoint, there were 19 solutions before desalination of water, and the stations were working. You have to correct the price of water. There are incentives that you have to give the users, and especially those that use the largest amounts of water, and you have to have a smart combination of incentives. So that is number 1. Number 2, of course, we have to learn to prioritize. More so now. On binational waters, we are advancing. I think binational conversation is going in the right direction, from 317, 318, 319, and 323. We have established very clear elements in those so that we can really get along or live together using this resource that we share with each other. But we have advanced in that area, but I would say that we're not totally prepared, but we're in the process of preparing. And this is a continuous process of preparation, and it's going to continue being so. So in that regard, that's what I wanted to say about those 2 questions. Transparency, so that you can prioritize, and to have very clear that you need more than one type of incentive for water savings. And that is one way you can face this crisis that we're living right now in the Colorado River Basin.
Rosario, in my case, something that I've been thinking as, are we prepared? Some parts are better prepared than the others. And there have been some kind of programs that we can kind of look back and see what have worked. Some of those have been water conservations, buying, leasing water rights from the agriculture. So San Diego, the Metropolitan, they've been a partnership with the IID, Coachella to do that. Yes, it has been some of those projects. Something that when I arrived to California and I start traveling on that area, there is something called, or they were referring to it as the F word. And the F word, it was following. And that is because when a municipal or a city comes and start buying those water rights, it will leave the land without agricultural production. And that will require less jobs available along the border. So some of those, I mean, we have experimented. These are kind of not only one decision, it will be many decisions, water conservation in the cities. We'll have to do some of the crops, rotation of lands. It will be important now. The one other thing that I do want to point it out. So the basin is predicated in 17.5 million acre feet. So 7.5 for the upper states, 7.5 for the lower, 1.5 for Mexico. And we don't have that water. Like we really don't have that water. Just for the starters is that we've been using way much more water than we predicated to be there. In Mexico, we have a lot of more water uses than water available. And this is, we've been doing a lot of over extraction there. The aquifer is being depleted. The reality is that this is not an if it's going to crash, it's when. In Mexico, we're using 2.5 million, 2.5 cubic kilometers, 2.3, 2.2 million acre feet. Out of, we receive from the Colorado 1.85 and using 2.4. I mean, this is to be honest, are we prepared? We've been borrowing. I think we are using more than we're supposed to do. Is it about money? The desalination plants in San Diego, I mean, it's very difficult to get past them, the regulations, but if you do it in Mexico, that maybe the regulations might be lower. They are still gonna throw the brine on the Atlantic, on the Pacific, sorry. I think that some of these things it is more than about money. It is so the recognition that we are with less amount of water, we're using way much more, that there is no individual solution, that we will have to do all the different difficult solutions that we need to build consensus, that it has to be from both countries, that everyone is going to feel the pain. And I think those are some of the situation that we have right now. And again, to me, this is kind of clear. It is just, we're just starting there.
I want to rescue a comment that Alfonso did, and it sparked my interest. Alfonso, you mentioned that at binational level, the planning process or whatever needs to be done under these conditions is working better or is working okay as compared to, I guess, domestically in the Mexico side, I'm assuming. If this is agreed by all of you, I mean, why would, I mean, for me, it's like contrasting, right? At binational level, I mean, we are moving a little bit faster. We are adapting a little bit faster. We're doing things. We're preparing, or at least we are facing the problem at binational level. But when it comes to domestically on the Mexico side, Arizona, California, we don't seem to be going that fast. So, I don't know. That's a big question in my head right now. What do you guys think about it? Or am I misunderstanding something here?
Rosario, I guess I have a question to ask you to clarify your question. When you say we're not moving that fast, are you saying we're not prepared? Because I'll start with an answer, and this is really what Arizona officials have been saying, and others as well, and that is that there has been preparation by some. I mean, we have a government agency in Arizona, the Arizona Water Banking Authority. Since 1997, they have been storing water underground, We do a lot of managed aquifer recharge, underground storage, exactly for times of shortage in deliveries of the Colorado River water through the Central Arizona Project. But this has been for the cities and for the tribal nations higher priority water. It's not for agriculture. And even the shortage sharing criteria, drought plans, there has been planning. And so people aren't panicked. But what they're also saying is we didn't expect it to be as bad a problem as soon as it has become and expect it to last. I mean, I heard a presentation this morning that the latest report from the US Bureau of Reclamation shows expect shortage for the next 4 or 5 years. So we're having constant shortage conditions, maybe as deep as a tier 3. And some people are saying tier 4, which isn't even in the regulations. Within the next 5 years, when we're supposed to be renegotiating the post 2007 guidelines. And so I would say that people have prepared, some, and others are scurrying to catch up. And there is a question in the chat we can come back to, but the farmers in Central Arizona have the right to use groundwater, but they don't have enough pumping capacity. So they're working on trying to install more pumping capacity. So I think it's a combination, Rosario, of like, what can we do and what needs to be done, but not in certain areas a state of panic, because people see that there are solutions available, but they're not going to be implemented necessarily overnight.
In response to the question that Rosario asked, yes, I can see, I can visualize, and based on what I see in the minutes and the acts, everything, they all mention the word cooperation and a number of measures from 317 to 323 that have to do with this part of the Colorado River. 317, 18, 323. At least there is a proactive process trying to interpret in a better fashion the conditions of the basin. And that's at the binational level. And yeah, that's in fact what I wanted to say and what you understood. So locally, things are not exactly as fast or moving as fast or proactively, because there are different sectors. And I'm referring, for example, to the Mexican side. We receive water from the Colorado River. We have the agricultural sector that consumes 85% of the total volume we receive. Then from here, we send water to the coastal areas, the thirsty cities of Tijuana with a high level of demand. There are different sectors, different priorities. And of course, it is very difficult, even when there's no drought, to come to an agreement. But as you mentioned a moment ago, or was mentioned, I think the first step has been taken at the binational level. Second step would be that we need to be aware of a prolonged drought for over 2 decades now. We have a declining trend, and identify then the sectors where we could rescue volumes to face this in a different fashion. And I agree with Samuel and others who mentioned this. It is the agricultural sector, but it's not a matter of taking away water from the agricultural sector. It's a productive sector. In the Mexicali Valley, they produce what we export to the US. So we would be shooting our own foot. So we would need to give them some incentives to reduce consumption. And when I talk about reduction, I'm talking about those volumes that we talk about, those percentages are pretty high, but I'm talking about a 2 or 3% in the short to medium term. And that's possible with good management, good water management locally. And that means being prepared, being ready to consume less water, to maintain a reserve for future conditions that might be even more critical. So, and that's why I was saying we're in a continuous process of preparation, of adaptation, but we need to make information needs to flow in a more transparent and open way to the local actors, the users of the water. And I think there are also opportunities in the urban sectors. It's true that less is consumed compared to agriculture, but we have losses sometimes up to 20% with all the operators in Baja California. And there is a very, very low percentage of the usage of reclaimed water. For example, Tijuana uses only 6 to 7% of the total of reclaimed water, residual or wastewater that's treated. So there's many things we can do before saying that nothing can be done. So I'll confirm that, yes, we're a little bit more advanced in the bilateral relations than we are with the tasks we need to undertake at the local level, at least on the Mexican side.
Leopoldo, ¿quisieras agregar algo a este punto?
Leopoldo, would you like to add something to this point? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, well, I don't want to wish, I mean, to come as, you know, somebody that just wants to complain about things, you know. But when I say that the problem is money, I'm not only talking about, you know, money for water technology or water plants, you know. Yes, we have to tackle the problem in many aspects. But if we want, like, for example, to stop groundwater extraction, you know, pumping, we need money for that as well. We need supervisors, you know, from Conagua or from SEA to go and check the local wells. You know, we need money to make water quality analysis to study the watersheds. You know, the last studies of the watersheds are from the 70s, for example. I mean, obviously there are new studies as well, but the money for these studies is smaller every time. So how can we manage something that we don't really know how it works? This monitoring process has to be permanent, okay? And that costs money. We need money, again, for the studies, for water potabilization, for wastewater reclamation, for better irrigation of the farmers. I'm not saying that the farmers have to, you know, deal with all the costs. I mean, they really need incentives, definitely. And we also need water conservation in the cities and money to end the water leaks, you know, probably better tariffs or whatever. I mean, but this is a very complex thing. And the only, my main concern is that if things are just kept, if we keep doing the same things as in years past, you know, with this lack of transparency and all of this, we are not going to change the results. We really need to change how money is allocated and how it's spent. And again, we have to invest in all of this, these studies at the watershed level, so that we really know how much water we have, what is the quality, and how can we use it better. Thank you, Rosario.
Thank you. And I just noticed that I spoke Spanish before to introduce you. So sorry, it comes and goes. So a quick question before we go to a couple of questions from the audience. You know, in the Rio Grande, it is very common, it is usual to hear this from everyone, from politicians, policymakers, every 5 years, that we are praying for rain, right? Because rain will solve all the problems with Texas or with the US. Mexico is always praying for rain, and everybody prays for rain after the 5-year cycle. Is that an option for the Colorado River? Pray for rain. It has happened in the past in the Rio Grande. It has worked. You know, we don't know if it's going to keep working. Apparently last year didn't work, or the last cycle didn't work. So can we say the same about the Colorado River?
So Rosario, I'll just say that there's nothing to be lost with prayer, right? I mean, why not? It doesn't cost you anything. But I don't know that you can establish a causality here, right?
No,
Yeah,
but the reliance on it. That's my point.
So,
the
but
reliance of it.
here's my real answer to that is, for the Colorado River, we have to look at the headwaters and what's happening there in terms of the inflows into the lakes, the storage reservoirs, Lakes Powell and Lake Mead. So we're talking about snow. We've got to wish for snow, pray for snow. There are some weather augmentation, weather modification programs that the basin states have been involved in Wyoming and the upper parts of the watershed. But it's not only about the precipitation, it's also about the temperatures, because sometimes the snowpack has looked okay, but then the temperatures warm up so quickly that you don't get the runoff. And then you have the high temperatures and the soils get hard. And I'm not a soil scientist. I think Sam may know more about that than I do, but you don't get the same kind of infiltration and so forth. And then you've got the fires that are affecting the watershed. So it's really a systemic set of problems. And I would note that I was listening to our local NPR radio today, and here in Tucson, we had the second driest summer monsoon season ever last summer, and we've had the third wettest this summer. And so it's been like the seesaw or whiplash, they were calling it. And a lot of questions have come up about, well, what does the rain do about the drought? Well, when over 35% of the water used in Arizona comes from the Colorado River, the rain conditions in Arizona don't matter all that much as far as the supply, but they can affect demand. So it is a big system. And what's wrong with praying? You know, I'm not going to ever argue against that.
No, I guess my question was more into, can we rely on the weather, considering the trend that we have seen, considering that, I mean, that's what our politicians say, oh, instead of adapting, instead of, planning, instead of working on, incentives, everything that we have talked, they prefer to say, let's pray, which I don't have anything against that, but can we rely on that? And not on the praying, we can always pray, but that's kind of, let's rely on what the weather says to plan for the future. And I don't know, considering the current trend, I don't know that's going to save us. I mean, it hasn't. We can be a lot of faithful, but it's very irresponsible from my perspective to rely on the weather, given that the weather is so, you can crash it. You can crash this in a second.
Well, and Rosario, I would say that the decision makers in the lower basin and in the whole basin, they're not going to sit idly by and just depend upon the natural systems. I mean, the answer is, we'll be lucky, we'll be fortunate. It'll be a good problem to have if we have many years of wetness. It'll take more than 1 or 2 years, but nobody's depending upon that. I think 10 years ago, you might have seen a different general attitude, but right now people are concerned.
Does anyone else?
I believe that also the characteristics of the flow, if you look at the 100-year chart for the river, the Colorado River, those peaks, those troughs, that's something that you have to see clearly. That's the nature of the Colorado River. We have to know that the decision makers, the academics, and the populations, we're always going to be facing a prolonged period of drought. Then we will have a surplus. We will have an abundance period, but we cannot depend on that. We have to be prepared for the worst possible scenario, always. And to that extent, I think there's a lot to do on trying to incorporate, and I insist on this, on the Mexican side, we have not included local actors enough. There's always permanent complaints. It happened in Chihuahua that the decision makers are not really including farmers, small proprietors, the citizens, the urban citizens, so that they can participate in the process. And that leads to a failure when decision makers make their decisions. So that has to be changed. We saw this at the previous fora. We need to have effective governance, effective management of water. We need horizontal decision making, and now more than ever, we need that horizontal governance on both sides of the border and between the two countries. Otherwise, we will be making the wrong decisions, or we will be adapting to a slower pace than what's required. And that's very important. From the academic side, we could say, yeah, we're doing joint work. This is one of those exercises, but we still need to incorporate more with us, with academia. We need that intensive dialogue between those of us who study these issues and those decision makers who define water policies. And that's part of the adapting. It's done less in the Mexican side than on the American side. So we need to work on that too. So, I mean, there's many pending tasks. We need adaptation at every level, in every sense, at institutional level, adapting uses. And we've been discussing the big uses, the ones we have at the front of our minds, but we talk very little about the original inhabitants, the indigenous tribes. For example, the Kukapas here, the ones who were originally here by the river, and they are at the bottom of the list now, the forgotten ones, or other users, the environmental users. So these are going to be the groups that are going to suffer more for bad decisions. We need to incorporate those voices more, environmental groups and the original populations of this area.
Thank you, Alfonso. Is there any other comment from Leopoldo and Samuel? I want to go with a question here that you might be probably interested in getting into, but I wanted to ask if you have any additional comments to this.
No, Rosario, I don't.
No.
Thank you.
Samuel, you good? Okay, I'm assuming you are. I didn't hear you, but there's a question from Deborah, and she says, I am wondering about how the surface water crisis interfaces with groundwater use, particularly since groundwater is an important source for surface waters in the parts of the basin as well. So this is an important. Who wants to take the lead on this? The groundwater element of the surface water crisis.
Okay.
If I could mention something totally, for instance, the surface water and the underground water and the groundwater, they have a direct relationship. The main source of the Mexicali Valley is exactly the Colorado River water. That is what you use to water in those districts. So that relationship is also lost at times. So sometimes it's not well managed. And I heard, people tell you have to optimize the use of water, use it to the max. And by saying that, they're talking about irrigation levels, very high irrigation levels. So when we think if we do that, you are not sending water underground anymore. And that has been overexploited, and it's in a deficit right now. There's a deficit of water. So if you do that, you you're making those static levels even deeper, and then the maritime intrusion levels may get worse. So perhaps we need to make it more effective and efficient. And when we have to think about it, first of all, we have to think and have a very clear idea that there is a direct relationship. And very recently, I would hear people say, well, and when you're talking about groundwater, what does it have to do, the Mexicalian groundwater, with the Colorado River water, surface water? We need to understand this very clearly, not just a scientist, but everybody needs to understand, because this is a question that a public officer asked me. We all have to understand this very clearly so that you can make the right decision. There is a very close relationship, at least at the end of the basin of the Colorado River basin, there is a direct relation between groundwater and surface water, and the overuse or bad management on one of the sides really affects the other one directly, not in 10 years, right now. It's an immediate effect. So this is something that I wanted to say about our local experience where we received the Colorado River water.
Sam, you wanted to say something?
Yes. So in terms of the groundwater, I think it's another wicked problem. So as water is coming from the US into Valle de Mexicali, then I mean, the quality is not as good as for agricultural production. So it has to be mixed with groundwater. That the lining of the All-American Canal and some others reduce the recharge, that it is located in a place where it doesn't rain. So there is not that much rainfall recharge. At the end, we have created a system where the aquifers it's been bleeding for a long time. So water has been extracted at a faster pace, at a way faster pace than it is replenished for a long time. And here it is what I was mentioning. It is a wicked problem because in some parts of the Mexicali Valley, the water quality is simply not there, and it has to be mixed up. And then there is the need to do that. And the other one is that for how long are we going to keep that? And I think that's as I am seeing this it will be important to address that. Other parts, so for instance, Coachella, they are right now doing some managed aquifer recharge. They have some groundwater banking. What Sharon mentioned with the Central Arizona project, they pump the water up and then they put it in the ground. So it is thinking about water as one resource. Sometimes it might be one of the problems, or it is becoming a problem. It might be one of the solutions. Yes, I think it is exactly sometimes the same as in the Bravo, that we forget about groundwater.
Sharon, I know you want to say something on this.
Yeah, because I mentioned groundwater earlier, I wanted to at least say a few words here, and that is the situations differ in different parts of the basin. Groundwater is a more local resource and doesn't get moved around like the surface water. And so in the particular interest or situation instance of the Central Arizona farmers, they're far away from the river. And historically, they relied on aquifers that were overdrafted, and the area was put in an active management area for groundwater. And then in the early 90s, as the Central Arizona project was completed to their region and different policies were put into effect to encourage the use of surface water in place of groundwater, they became very reliant on the surface water. Groundwater levels rose, but not to the levels they were at, 50, 60 years ago. And so what's happened though is that, or what is happening is with the reduction in surface water deliveries to the farmers in Central Arizona, they have the legal rights to go back on groundwater. There is groundwater there, but it's very deep. It's more expensive to pump. Water quality comes in. And it's fossil groundwater. It's not being recharged by a river. The recharge rates are very, very low. And so it's not viewed as a long-term sustainable situation for them. And there's also implications for community development because of the pressures on the groundwater there. So it is an integrated system, but sometimes not in that hydrologic way. It's a constructed integrated system. And there is replacement of groundwater for surface water, but talking about the F word that Sam mentioned earlier, the farmers in that region are talking about fallowing quite a lot of irrigated acreage in the next year. Maybe not as much as the next year if they get the pumps put in, but anyway, lots of dislocation going on in that region.
Thank you, Sharon. Leopoldo, do you have any comment on this?
I would like to mention also that it is very important to learn to speak to each other, you know, between the academics and the government and the users. And that's one of the things that we have tried to do, but at least in the Mexican side, but I think that we have failed. You see, it's really complicated. I don't know why it is so complicated. Because, for example, the government, obviously they're the decision makers, you know, and as academics, we want to show them our work. Obviously, we knock on their door also asking them for money, you know, to do the studies that we think are needed. But also, the government sometimes open their doors, you know, to the public. Like, for example, last year, they used UABC, the university, to come close to the public to write the Baja California State Water Plan. You know, that was an event that, you know, lasted for several weeks, in which we, the government, the state of Baja California Water Agency tried to put on board the agriculture, the farmers, the industrial users, obviously also urban users, you know, domestic users, but it didn't really have much of an impact. I don't know if it was because of the pandemic and the meetings were all only through Zoom. You know, it wasn't possible to have face-to-face meetings, but the attendance was really low, and almost in every meeting, there was one meeting every week for a couple of months. Basically, the same people would always, you know, appear on the Zoom conferences. I mean, and we tried to get in touch with farmers and other users, but there was no answer, you know. So sometimes I don't think it's only a problem of the government, you know. Sometimes I think us also as a community, as users, don't, whenever they ask us, no, government asks us for our opinion, we just don't raise our hands or our voices, you know. So we really need to work on that, I think, because only through that that way we will be able to really come up with solutions and to apply the solutions and to solve these problems, even if we start with obviously with a very small example, very small size, until eventually I think we can really reach you know, big solutions. I know that I actually surprise myself saying these things because I'm not the most optimistic person, you know. However, I just don't want to give up, you know. I think we really need to, and we have the capacity to make the changes that we need to make in order to have water for all our users.
I totally agree with you on that. Definitely. And there's a lot of you know, a lot going on in the chat that please don't miss it, because it's really good. And we're talking about praying, and we're talking about getting the social component, the communication component, and the responsibility component. It's really not a question of one answer. There's never going to be one answer. There's going to be a lot of things going on at the same time. And yes, I think there's a communication component that we have underestimated, I think, as an important element to get this going on. And probably that's why at binational level, which we are kind of forced to talk to each other, right? More formally, that it might be more effective, or we are moving a little bit more, or we are working a little bit more proactive than at the domestic level, at least in the Mexico side, I must say, as we have seen. So please follow up that conversation on the chat. Is very useful. And I just want to, we have a couple of minutes, and I want to give all of you, I make some notes here, and I'll give you 1 minute to all of you to wrap up. But I just want to give some notes on what we learned today and what we can take home. Well, I'm at home already, but you know, figuratively speaking, the new normal water conditions is that they're not normal. We have a lot of variability, we have a lot of uncertainty, and we need to adapt for that, and we need to plan for that. And it's challenging. It requires the involvement and the engagement of all stakeholders, not just at the national level, at domestic level. We all have our own issues at each country, and we need to deal with that at the same time that we deal at binational level. There was a question of money, there was a question of funding, and then there was the issue of priority. What is really the priority, and what do we need to work on to get this on the priority on the binational agenda and on the national agendas? I think, and I may add this, is a lot of political will out there involved, but also the involvement of stakeholders. It's needed, but it's complicated. But it's really the recipe for long-term sustainability. We have mentioned that we need institutional incentives. Of course, if we need to change our habits, if we need to change our models of development, we definitely need incentives, especially for farmers, and especially, I mean, for everyone actually that uses water, because this is gonna, you know, it's gonna, if the trend continues this way, it will start with one sector and then the next one and the next one and the next one until we get to the priority sectors. So really, we need incentives for population, and we need money, we need funding, we need planning. We need everything we can get, and praying as well in the top of that. As Jerry mentioned, if nothing else works, I mean, what's wrong with it? And I totally agree. But we need to try everything else. Otherwise, we're not going to need any policymakers out there. We need to define priorities. We need to learn to prioritize. And that's a learning process, and it's going to be a steep learning curve. We need to work more proactively. We need to add the transparency of what are we doing with water. The less water, the more transparency, right? The more pressure, the more the need, and more population is coming into the border region. The horizontal governance takes place. So from all the lists that I'm reading right now, everything comes down to, you know, policy, decision-making process, social component, communication. Everything is about us. It's really on our responsibility of communities, stakeholders, academics, all the sectors involved in making, you know, our little effort to improve conditions is really up to us, and to make things, and we really don't have any other option. So
Rosario,
I hope I didn't sound very pessimistic, but I'm gonna leave it with you.
Rosario,
Guys, you stop sharing that screen so we can see our panelists. Sí, adelante.
I do think that it is important to again once again recognize that if we consider ourselves part of the problem, we're part of the solution, and that the issues along the border, it's not that they are separated. How well we they decide to collaborate, to discuss, to communicate all these problems and to act, in the Colorado, it will have definitely an effect, or it will be seen in the Rio Bravo. Why cannot we do it? And vice versa. And the how in this case Mexico is linked in their fate of what is happening in the US. It is exactly the same in the Rio Bravo, in the Rio Grande, and the way that we are treated and being proactive, it is exactly an example on the other side. And I think again, this is throughout the border. So I think I'll keep on that one, that we are part of the solution. I also like what Leopoldo mentioned, which is that yeah, we should see ourselves as taking a step or stepping up and talking with decision makers and speaking up and being able to communicate with others, because yeah, here we can be overeducated and analyze a lot of these things, but definitely we need to run the extra miles to actually go and talk to the others and do that. I'm really glad to see all of us here, because no one of us is just saying like, well, you know, it will be the problem of the next generation, or someone else will solve it. We are still here, and we are putting here a good fight to make this a better world. So anyways, I think that's where I leave it.
Thank you, Sama. Alfonso, do you want to wrap it up? One last thought?
Of course, it's been a pleasure to have been here with you. And I would like to repeat this idea that all of this is going to lead us to work, do deeper work, both the academics and politicians, legislators, everybody that has to make decisions, so that we can manage demand. We need to think of reducing usage, because we still have this idea that we can manage the supply. And when we talk about managing supply, we are talking about how to create new sources of water, how to bring more water. And this is not an option that's going to work here in the Colorado River. There is no more water. So this is a radical change that we need to implement. And the other thing is a little commercial. There's going to be a new book that has to be with these novel approaches of collaboration between Mexico and the US. And there's going to be a new book about it. And I want to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward for that. Sharon, do you want to take the last thought?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to participate. It's been a good discussion. Rosario, your summary was great. The only thing I would add to it is, as I think about the four of us working in academia, what we want to do is we want to be trusted as sources of good information, being able to communicate that information, because, you know, Leopoldo, I would agree with everything he has said about process and stakeholders, and that's a big thrust of my work. And the ability to communicate, of the trust in what we share as education, I think that's so very important. And you know, we just, part of the situation is decision makers will change. Elections come, elections go, political parties come and go. But in a sense, we're here, and the students we're educating become the leaders and so forth. So, you know, we just have to keep at it. You know, I think that was part of the message, that we just have to be tenacious. It may be discouraging at times, but we just need to all keep at it.
Yeah, I want to retire now. I'm not ready to. Leopoldo, your last thoughts.
I think you wrapped it up. The summary was really, really good. Thank you very much for that. And also, yes, Sharon, I think I share your optimism, you know, that we will definitely, we have to keep pushing forward. Sometimes it's really, you know, frustrating, you know, sometimes it's actually sad, you know, that sometimes we are not, the decisions are made based on any other thing instead of, you know, science and technology. But it's not only, you know, in the Mexican side. On the Mexican side, it's also in the US side, unfortunately. Probably it's a worldwide problem as well at the moment. But anyway, I mean, I'm optimistic. I think we have to keep going. If we don't do it, then nobody else will, you know? So we have spent so many years studying water and all of this that it would be a shame just to give up, you know, and just ride the bike for the rest of our lives, you know. I would like to do that, but I'm not there yet at the moment. But anyway, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for the panels and to the to the attendants. See you on the next break.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Keep it up with the good work. Really, it's hard. I mean, hard times, very challenging times. But we're all gonna be in the history books, hopefully. I don't know doing what and what will they say, but definitely this is gonna make a change, or it's gonna be a threshold. We are facing a threshold, and that's a good thing for us. And that's a responsibility for us. So anyway, thank you for the panelists. I really, really appreciate to the audience for being here and for sharing your time. This coffee break is recorded, as you've seen, and it's going to be posted on the website for future reference, both English and Spanish versions. And with that, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you again. Let's be optimistic. I know it's Friday afternoon.
I know. Feliz Año Nuevo. Happy New Water Year. Feliz Año Hídrico Nuevo.
Gilbert. Hey, or follow our social media. We have our winners of our water for art contest. Really good pictures out there. So take a look at the website, take a look at the social media, and we'll keep you posted on what's coming up. And yeah, we're going to have an October 19th event for the awards ceremony. Hopefully you can join us. Anyway, thank you, everyone. Thank you for the team, to the team of the forum, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Rosario. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, as always.
Sharon.
Thank you, Rosario. Thank you, Samuel.
Sí,
Thank
Leopoldo,
you,
Alfonso.
Leopoldo, Alfonso,
Gilbert,
Sharon,
good seeing
Samuel.
you. Gusto en verte. Luis, Mark, see you. Carrie. Hey, Mariana, muchas gracias. Diana, Javier, José Luis, muchas gracias.